Thank you. It's nice to be here at a conference called We Are IBL because I'm from We Are Marshall. To those of you who are newbies, let me say that this is only my third conference in IBL. I gave 2 5-minute talks at previous ones, so I encourage you to give a 5-minute talk if you have something to say. And it didn't hurt me any, so it won't hurt you either. I read my abstract this morning, and son of a gun, it actually says what I'm going to talk about. Confucius understood active learning, so we're going to talk about my efforts. Your students clam up. We're going to talk about student participation. I have some successes. I've been doing this for a while. 34 semesters, by my count, since 1996. I was practicing at essentially IBL, unaware of the community or that anybody was interested in the kind of stuff I was doing. I've been keeping track of participation. I count activities using tickets, a few of which are up there. There's a green one with a Larson cartoon on it, somebody writing at the board. I give that for working at the board. There's a blue one for speaking from the seats, and there's a green one with a watch on it, cleverly enough for watching. I hand these to students as needed. They return with an autograph. This way I can keep track of what's been happening because I have no memory whatsoever. And come down to some information. This term, how often did my students speak in class? This last semester in my classes, 3 of them, 2,034 times, plus the ones I didn't count. So they weren't exactly quiet. I use physical tickets, and I count them in the grade, so I actually had to count them. So how many times to work at the board? 1,114. Similarly, they were working, I'm having to count things, they were working in teams or solo. Either way, if anybody was at the board, they got the same credit. So if you were in a team, you got the same credit as if you were working a problem solo. Now, they volunteered to go to the boards. What happened to the people on a given day who didn't volunteer? Well, I had 742 trips for them going to the board to watch up close. They'd been basically sitting around, chatting about yesterday's movies or tonight's plans or whatnot during classes. And finally, I decided to say, well, get up there and get some credit. 20%'s better than nothing. So to summarize what you just saw, 2,034 times speaking, 1,114 times at the board, 742 times watching and observing. Totals up to 3,890. I had to write that down because I knew I wouldn't be able to remember it in front of you. And it felt like a normal semester. This is not unusual. I looked up the previous semester. I didn't get all the numbers down, but instead of 2034, I had 1998. And I didn't look at the other stuff. So for 17 years, I've been progressing by blundering forward. See a problem, try to get a solution to it, and we're making more and more IBL. So back to some motives here. Why give credit for watching? I love this cartoon. The day after I sent in the abstract, this showed up in the newspaper. It was a sign. But here is Mason standing up by the lecturer saying, you know, I nearly fall asleep. So I thought this might help. Says it all. So to emphasize, watchers can be close and attentive. They can ask and discuss, and I'm reading the slide. I shouldn't be doing that. Roles can switch. That's the important part. A watcher today can be a worker tomorrow, and a worker today can be a watcher tomorrow. But they're seeing mathematics. They're hearing it being discussed. And some effects from this. It's a feedback loop. Students get to meet each other in class instead of wandering in little phone booths of isolation, of course, figurative. They get some class ownership because they're talking to one another. They have some effect on what's going on. They bond as a class. You know, we're not talking super glue here, but you know, maybe Post-it notes. And why does this happen? Because I require it. It's 5% of the grade. I'm sorry, 10% of the grade. Speaking is 5, working at the board or watching at the board is 5. They're each a separate zero-sum game. I started this because speaking is something that people are terrified of doing. I'm a perfect example of that right now. It's also annoying to the students because they think a math class should be different than what I'm doing to them, for them, with them, what have you. Requirements imply consequences, and it's not extra credit. We may require some persuasion. Here, one set of cavemen are getting the secret of fire from another caveman. Okay, I'll talk, he says. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how this works. So we're going to examine the term from back to front, later in the semester, moving forward toward the beginning. So more or less weeks 3 through 15. Here's the working goals. So a typical day starts with getting questions, getting volunteers to answer the questions at the board, getting the non-volunteers to go up and watch the workers. And when they get done, then what happens? So after they've sat down, I go over the problems, explain and correct. If a solution is really terrible, I will rework it, but I will never take back anybody's ticket. I say, well, if I didn't like what you wrote, be a politician and pretend you had nothing to do with it. So while I'm reworking these things, I can make mistakes. I can not see an error. There's 2 different modes in my head. And when I'm presenting something, I may not spot an error in something. The students will spot it. They get credit. They have my back on this. It is a team. Keep a positive tone. Errors on the board are useful, as are errors in speaking, and speaking is speaking. So, solutions written, students are reseated. It's time for the oral credit. Any questions, answers, comments? Right or wrong on the answers, by the way. Right or wrong on the comments, get credit. Oftentimes I will ask a student, do you have a ticket yet? Yeah, I do. And they'll hold it up, or they'll say yes, or I can see it in front of them. Those are the people that aren't counted. Those are the times that exceed the 2034 that I was telling you. So it's all at day's end. Everybody returns the signed tickets, and I can keep track of that for the grades, and it is graded. So stepping back to weeks 1 and 2, we just have a few chances to get started right. In the early days, there's no watchers. This stuff is sufficiently unusual. I want to get the idea that, hey, we'll have teams, and it won't feel natural at the beginning, but the watchers would even muddy that up. So here's the way the teams developed, again, as I kind of blundered forward. I came in eager to start participation decades ago, practically. Who'd like to work this problem? Several hands shot up. I had not anticipated that. What am I going to do? How am I going to pick who's going to work the problem? Answer? Hey, why not all of you guys come up here? Produce one answer, because I don't want to see 5 of them. And it's turned out well. They have to talk to one another. That's good. So if there's several problems, several volunteer for the same problem, make them a team. And then we keep watching delayed until teamwork seems normal. Stepping back to the very first day, where they don't know me and I don't know them. It's kind of like right now. I explain this system to them a little bit. Any first day speaking counts. This is a hint for you guys. We're investing for the future, getting attitudes adjusted, classes being conditioned. I'm priming the pump. I'm not showing you the slides I'm reading from. You guys should tell me that. On the first day, this would get credit. You may see that Calvin, 2 minutes, son of a gun. Calvin is asking if class can be dismissed. Sure, Calvin. Here's a ticket, but no, class is not dismissed. First day it's easy, tomorrow it's harder. Math class marches on, and at this point I had to pause for questions. Got any questions? Now, normally you're my first questioner. I'm treating this like class. Uh-oh, you're okay, it's coming for you. I'm treating this like class. Normally I'd be giving you a ticket here, but this is distance learning.
All right.
So here's your ticket right up here on stage.
I like it.
And I won't, well, go ahead.
So what, if you have 5 students at the board working on a proof, what are the other students doing? Sitting and waiting?
Well, there's other problems being worked. So this is parallel processing. So so there's different teams at the board at the same time. Okay. And then all those people who sat down and didn't volunteer, when this is working well, I'm rousing them, get up, get up. Your fanny has to leave the seat for you to get credit.
Okay.
But you're getting 20% credit for 20% of the amount that the workers would get. And by the way, if this were class, the first thing I'd say is now she is the proud owner of thousands of tickets. You know, if there's 20 tickets for everybody in class, she now owns every one of the, 20 points for everybody in class. She now owns every one of those points because it's a zero-sum game. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So on one of the slides, it said short time is a downside. They notice it? Could you elaborate?
Yes, and now, lady, you only have half the number of points you had before. You have a ticket, sir. So this does take more time. So at the end, there's less time to lecture. They do complain about that. So they kind of go out a little bit, if you're a little bit short on new material, but that may be IBL too. Does that kind of get to where we're going?
Just about logistics, how many students do you have in a class and what subject matter?
All right, good question. You also have a ticket. My classes last semester were trigonometry, calculus 1, and calculus 2. Grand total for the 3 classes started with 80-ish and ended up with 71.
I was just wondering, are your students coming in cold and looking at these problems for the first time, or did they do work on them ahead of time?
No, this is homework. You know,
Okay.
who couldn't do the homework last night? Which is what I'd been doing for years and years and years, but this is now getting them to do it. See, I have enough years that, if you go back even before the 17, I've still got plenty.
Do you ever have a problem with counterfeit tickets?
Well, the students where I work at Marshall are pretty honest. No, I don't have problems with counterfeit tickets, but I have given some thought to how I would mark them in ways that they couldn't counterfeit them. Weird little hole punches, or the occasional, this thing that you'd squeeze like an embosser. Thank you. You, sir, now have a ticket as well. Other questions? This is the way things work, by the way. We get pretty conversational. I want a class to be kind of loose.
I'm curious to know, how did you come up with this system?
One bit at a time. 17 years ago or so, we were creating a new major at Marshall. The provost at the time, Lyle Wilcox, who had come from James Madison University, said he wanted the students in the new program to stand and deliver, which I knew as the idea of an old highwayman, stick 'em up, but his idea was he wanted them to stand up and present. And so I started from that. Lyle Wilcox kind of is the genesis of this. First I had them to start presenting and talking, and then I realized I had to separate the two pools, and gradually I'd evolve. As problems cropped up, I'd try to think of a way to fix it. At the end of every day. I won't ask for yours back. Did you already have one? Yes. He doesn't get another one. And well, only one per day. Other questions? This works for all kinds of classes. Yeah, you look familiar too. This is your second one, isn't
Second
it?
question, yeah. So I'm trying to do something where my students present their homework with a TA. So I need an unexperienced person to implement something like this. And I'm wondering, the big question I'm trying to solve is how to get the students to work enough on the problems before they go to section, before they go to class, or are they going to sit back and
Well,
wait for a solution?
Interestingly enough, they don't really particularly want to be embarrassed, I think. But I also am carrying with me a letter from a colleague who was, I'm the only person who's actually doing what I was doing. So I had a colleague who wanted to see what I was doing, so she came for 2 visits. Then I asked her to write up what she saw, and she gave me this stunningly positive letter. You'd swear I paid money for this, but it's just beautiful. I don't have that many copies, but I'll certainly be glad to let you read one. They don't have to be that good at the beginning, your TAs, and the students will, I think, rise to the occasion if you kind of demand it. But I think my time is up, right? And I do have to dismiss class on time. So thank you very much for your attention.